Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I love introducing you to people who are committed to their own development as well as to the growth and development of others, and especially folks who want to help them become the very best version of themselves. And my two guests today achieved that to me in spades with their new book. And so I'm very excited to welcome as my guests today two people I consider very special, John David Mann and Gabriel Mann. Welcome, John and Anna.
Thank you so much.
Well, today we are going to be discussing their brand new book called The Go-Giver Marriage. And in that, it talks about the 5 secrets to lasting love. And of course, my podcast is typically business oriented. And the truth is, we're all whole human beings that have both personal side, our work life, but we're all one person. And these tips that are in this book, these secrets, apply especially to marriage or a long-term relationship. But honestly, as I read the book, I was just struck by how they apply to any other people in our lives who matter. So I want to first just say thank you to both of you for writing this book. It's profound, and I'm really looking forward to going deep with you today into the why and the how.
We are also looking forward to it greatly. It's our pleasure.
Well, let me give a little bit formal introduction for my listeners who are not familiar with you. John is the co-author of more than 30 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers and 5 national bestsellers. And you probably recognize one of his books, The Go-Giver. This is a book that he wrote in 2008 with Bob Burg, and it earned the 2017 Living Now Book Awards Evergreen Medal for its contribution to positive global change. And if you haven't read that book, you must get that one and read it too, because it has also 5 secrets that are related to, but somewhat different from the ones in the Go-Giver Marriage. Gabriel Mann earned her degree in clinical psychology before going on to serve as an educator, therapist, corporate trainer, speaker, and coach. She currently coaches Go-Giver Marriage clients and leads the Go-Giver Marriage Coaches Training Program, where she works with coaches from around the globe, teaching them to train. So I love the way you all are, duplicating yourselves to make it possible for more and more people to really learn about what's in your book and applying it to their relationships. So what I want to start with first is just thinking about the Go-Giver book itself. When that came out in 2008, and since then, it kind of took on a life of its own. So you had that book that really applies to every aspect of life. I'm curious, what was the seed that caused you to say, you know what, we need a book that's specifically geared to principles around marriage? So tell us that story.
Yes, the seed of that idea is the person I'm married to. And here's how that happened. So Bob and I wrote this book, The Go-Giver, and we actually first wrote it back in 2005. And the journey to print, to find a publisher, we were rejected 22 times by 22 publishers, rejected the manuscript on the way to publication. And by the time we actually published it, 2008, it is, of course, pegged as a business book. The subtitle is, a little story about a powerful business idea. But of course, it's more than a business idea. It's more than a business book, as you pointed out. And after the book came out, it sort of took on a life of its own, as you said. We saw people using it in churches, people using it in community groups, in family therapy, in high schools, in every walk of life. People teaching the principles out of the book. But back in 2005, when the first rough draft came out of my desktop printer and went plop on my desk, Anna was the person who picked it up because she's the first reader of every first draft of every book that I do. So, before anybody on the planet reads anything I've written, she reads it. And she has she has a wonderful critical eye, and she can see what's working and where it could use work. And so I listen to her. I have learned it's a good thing to do. She has always said she has great respect for a man who knows how to listen to a woman, and that's a piece of wisdom right there. So I gave it to her, and she said, "This is great. This book is going to be huge, and this would be a great book on marriage, because what you're describing in this book is how we are. It's how we are together." And back then, she had the idea we should write a Go-Giver book on marriage, and that was 17 years ago. And there have been a whole series of Go-Giver books since. There's been a Go-Giver book on leadership, a Go-Giver book on sales, which is, of course, about more than leadership and about more than sales, a Go-Giver book on genuine influence. There's a little Go-Giver handbook on education, but its time has come. And the thing that's unique about this book for me is that not only is it really Anna's brainchild and passion project, but it's really her life. And this has been her career. Her whole life has been devoted to helping couples and individuals live richer, more fulfilled lives, personally, not just in their work, but in their work and in their lives in every way. So it's I'm just giving you the fanfare, the introduction, the drum roll. It's Anna's doing. So here she is.
But I will say this, the parable, the book is divided in two halves. The parable is the first half, the practice is the second half. And the parable was written entirely by John. And John is a brilliant parable writer. I mean,
he is.
There's been at least a dozen now, and there's more coming. And this, I think, is the jewel of all the parables he's ever written. I think it is the most profound and most powerful one he's written.
That's great.
She's my cheerleader.
To talk about the roles you had in the book and how you kind of divvied up the responsibilities for the parts that you were just describing.
Yeah.
Well, John, as I said, wrote the parable. I wrote the practice. And it was when we first started talking about the book 17 years ago, we would, for all of our lives together, we go for long walks in the afternoon. And that's when we would talk about what were the elements that really are powerful in any relationship, but especially in a marriage. And so we really started talking about the secrets. What were they? And I said, probably more than a dozen years ago, we can't talk about the secrets without talking about their opposites, which are the really truly toxic behaviors that take down a marriage. And I said, if we write just a parable, then it won't be clear that there's behaviors to look out for. There's behaviors to check yourself on. And we also really need to explain to people that love is a practice. It's not an event. It's not an ecstatic feeling when you fall in love that you're going to stay in that feeling for the rest of your life. Life moves on, the honeymoon ends, and real life can be gritty. And so we wanted to be able to give people a section of the book that not only explained the secrets, explained their opposites, and gave people tangible client stories so that they could see the illumination of how it's dysfunctional and then how it gets transformed. And also so that we could share with them a real guide map to how to change their relationships.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
I'll add to that it was a really interesting symbiosis, the way that we worked in this book. And it's a little different than I've ever done before. You mentioned the over 30 books. Almost all of them, all but one or two, have been partnerships, co-writing. I've always had a co-author that I've worked with. But this is normally what I do when I work with a co-author is I kind of absorb their material. I talk with them, I read their stuff, and look at their blogs, I look at their other books if they have them, whatever. And then I go into seclusion. I shut the door and I mind meld my stuff with their stuff, like my material, my experiences with theirs, and come up with the content of the book, and I write the draft. I do that by myself. And then I open the door again and I share it with my co-author and say, here's my draft. And we go back and forth, and they may make comments and revisions and suggestions, and we adjust, and the book is done. That's how I work with everybody. With Anna, it was different. It was the first time that I've had a situation where it's like, this is my half and this is your half. We're gonna write this. She wrote the back part, I wrote the front part, and the whole time we were shooting the drafts back and forth. I mean, we live in the same house, and we've also worked together a lot before. I mean, we're not just a married couple. We've also been in business together. We were business colleagues before we were lovers, before we were a couple, before we were, who we are now. So, we have roots in business partnership, the two of us. So it wasn't new for us to work together. It was new for us to write together. And this was really, really fun because, in a way, the practice, it's like you read the story, and the story, like any parable, can illustrate some principles, but it does it in story form. And then you get to the practice, and Anna sits you down in the chair and says, okay, now I'm going to explain what you just read, why it works from a psychological standpoint. I'm going to explain it, kind of unwrap it, reverse engineer it, and give it to you in a task list. Here's how you do it. Here's the recipe. Which was really interesting for me to see because she brought all kinds of new perspective to the stuff I'd written that I didn't know was in there. It was like having, the Bible and then a whole volume of commentaries.
Exactly.
I didn't mean to just compare my writing. I didn't mean to just compare my writing to the Bible. Pardon me. Forget that.
Oh, no. But I do think that's a good analogy because I loved the fact that I got to the end of the story and then there was this explanation that brought it to life. And Anna, I just thought it was so effective to talk about the opposite and also be very specific about what does it look like in action and give real examples. And in our time together today, it would be a disservice to my listeners, first of all, to try to skim across all 5, because I don't think they could appreciate the real value that each one of these 5 secrets contains. So what I'd like to do is just have each of you share one of the secrets. I know you love all 5 of them because you included them, but just pick one today that you think that you feel particularly enthusiastic about and want to talk about, why it's important and then what it is and what does it look like in action. And either one of you can go first.
Shall I go first, sweetheart?
Sure.
Go with one, yeah?
You go first.
So sure. I mean, I'll start with, I'm going to start with the first secret. And it's the first secret in the book for a reason. There's 5 secrets. And what the secrets are is they're not secret really. What they really are is they're powerful, simple behaviors that you can do every day. They're not complicated. They're not grandiose. We're not asking you to completely change your personality or take on some huge project. It's 3 simple things you can do. 5 rather simple things you can do that will change the quality and the tone of your relationship. And the first we simply call appreciate. And it sounds so simple. We'll tell people we're working with, clients will say, well, you start with, take 3 times a day, find 3 things that you love about your partner, and then take a moment to tell them. Do one, do another, do it a 3rd time, 3 times a day. And 4 is okay, 5 is okay, but start with 3. And it sounds like ridiculous. Well, my husband knows I love these things about him. My wife knows I love these things about her. But do they? And if they already sort of know it, does that mean they don't need to hear it again? No, we need to hear it again. It's always a little odd for me to explain these because Anna does such a good job. She has the psychological perspective of it, but I'll say what she says, which is that this goes back to our roots in childhood, what psychologists call primary narcissism. When you're an infant, and when you're a baby even, and you're just forming your picture of your world and also your picture of yourself. And one of your greatest needs is to have the people around you, your parents, your uncles, your grandparents, whatever, saying, look at this beautiful baby. Aren't you so gorgeous? Aren't you so amazing? Look at these little 10 toes. And then as we're an infant, we start to read, say, I bet you can read that whole book all by yourself, or you are getting to be so tall. You are so strong. You are such a good guy. You are such a wonderful, all the things we say to our children because we naturally gush over them. They're like food. They are food. They're nutrients that are literally building their personality. So the point of the 5 secrets is the things that we needed as children, we still need as adults, because the children inside us is alive and well. From birth till the day we die, it's always there. As a child, being appreciated tells you who you are. It informs who you are. It helps you build who you are. As an adult, it reminds you who you are. And this is so important because the world beats us up. The world wears us down. The world is a stressful place. It's fiction, it's entropy, it's Newton's second law of thermodynamics, and it's exhausting. And at the end of the day, we're beaten up by colleagues, by bosses, by finances, by challenges at work, by things that didn't work out, by the app that doesn't function, the car that breaks down. And at the end of the day, to have our spouse say, I so appreciate the way you talk to our children. Or I love listening to you talk with your colleagues. You're so patient with them and they trust you so much. They know they can count on you. You have so much integrity. We hear these things from the person that we care about most. It's like water in an oasis in the desert. We need it so badly, but we forget to do that. By the way, you started out saying this is normally business focused. The exact same thing is true in the workplace. One of the greatest reasons people cite for leaving a marriage, for divorcing, is that they felt ignored, unappreciated by their spouse. Well, what is the number one reason employees cite for leaving a business, for quitting a job? They didn't appreciate me, right? It's like number one.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's so simple, but we take it for granted. When you're first in love, you gush all over your newfound flame, right? We do it. It's like, you're talking nonstop. But then we forget and we let it slide. It's not that I don't still love you. I just forget to tell you. I forget to tell you how. That's why the poet said, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Count the ways when you've been married for 25 years, not just when you've been in love for 25 days. So here's what happens, Meredith. There's in the book, and Anna goes into not only the secrets in the second half, but the opposites of the secret. And what happens is, in the absence of appreciation, you create a vacuum, and what starts to slip in is criticism. You start to pick at the other person, like, God, I wish you would you'd be on time with appointments. I wish you would pick up your socks. Couldn't you just have done this or done that? Or you start to kind of pick at them. And that is insidious. That is, what we say, the first deadly substance, the first toxic behavior that will dismantle and take down a marriage. Sweetheart.
Well, I didn't want to stop you, but I just wanted to add at the end of whatever you said, that criticism is actually considered one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse by marriage researchers, the Gottmans. And, they've spent the last 40 years actually in a lab looking at couples and how they interact and doing detailed research. And so criticism is actually one of the things that will not only tear a marriage apart, but it can end a marriage because it can become so insidious. And when you criticize somebody, you kind of leave them only one choice, and that is to be defensive. And defensiveness stops communication like a brick wall. I mean, it just stops it. Everybody walks away a little angry, and nothing actually transpires in terms of any kind of shift or healing. It's so much more powerful if you really need an intervention, if you will, around someone's behavior, to simply say something like, when this happened, this is how it felt to me. And I wonder if it's possible to kind of be aware of that. Not even to say, can you change it? Just be aware of it. Because when people feel like they're being invited to pay attention to something rather than being invited to, if you leave your socks on the bedroom floor one more time, I'm so angry about this. You just don't seem to ever pick them up. and the other thing is that appreciation teaches us about what's important. Because if you really are invested in appreciating somebody every day, whether it's a coworker, your boss, your employee, or your spouse, you're looking for ways that it's kind of like the 1-minute manager. You're looking for ways to give them that powerful feedback that says, you're doing a great job, or I really love it when you take care of this or do this. It's so nice, and I really appreciate it. And I will often say to people, it's even something as simple as taking out the trash. To be able to say, you take out the trash every week, and I just want you to know, the thought that I don't have to think about it and it's not on my to-do list is just such a relief. And I really want you to know how much I appreciate that. It's such a small thing, but it's enormous when it comes to somebody feeling like they're just not furniture.
There's so much you've said that is just so powerful, both of you. I think my husband and I are celebrating our 40th anniversary in June. And that's one of the things I know I've learned to do over time is notice and then comment on the specific things that he does that I truly appreciate. Because especially with someone that has skills or abilities or a knack for something that I don't, they take it for granted, and this is the thing I think that is the gift we can give to the people we live with, as well as those we might work with, is simply pointing out what they do that we are blown away by. Sometimes I think, and tell me if this has been your experience, sometimes people withhold compliments because somehow they think it's a zero-sum game. If I say this positive thing, then that takes away somehow from something about me. Do you find people are ever hesitant because they don't want it to go to the person's head or some other reason that they hold back? Or is it just a habit of being used to criticizing and not looking for the good things?
I think that's a really common family dysfunction, to think that you shouldn't praise your children because it will go to their head.
Right.
You don't want to create. In fact, people think that if you over appreciate or over praise somebody, especially a child or an adolescent, that you're going to create a narcissist. And the opposite is true. The more you withhold feeding and nourishing this child, the more that you create a narcissist. It's the deficit of praise, attention, and feedback. Children they're like sponges. They need feedback. When a child starts reading a book on their own, the most powerful thing you can do is just applaud. It's the same, I've known families that would applaud when their child was potty training. Every time they came off the potty chair, everybody would applaud. And, they'd be walking out of there going, I did it. I did it. But that's important. These are really important things. Praise and appreciation are one and the same. They really feed and nourish the very person at their core. And the more personal you can make it, in the explanation portion of the book, we really talk about it being something that you really are specific with.
Yes, I love that part. Mm-hmm.
And for 20 years, I've been telling John he'd be a phenomenal novelist. And he didn't quite believe it. But 20 years later, his first novel was nominated for a Barry Award. And it's like, when you infuse somebody not only with your belief, but with appreciation for their writing, they start to think bigger. And that's true in business in spades.
Yes.
Because you can take an ordinary employee who's doing a good job at their work, and when you start to really pour into them and appreciate them and give them bigger and bigger tasks and really reward them for what they're doing, they will step up in ways that will shock you because they feel seen, they feel witnessed. And that's the very core of appreciation, is feeling witnessed by another person.
Mm-hmm. Powerful. I love that, Anna. Thank you. John, was there something else you were going to add?
There's always more I could add, but that's just that's the nature. That's the
Right.
nature of me.
We need to give Anna her opportunity to
Yeah.
identify the one secret that you would like to talk more about today.
Well, John always says we have 5 children and we have no favorites. But the first secret that you just went over with John, that has always kind of been my favorite, just because I feel there is not enough praise and not enough attention given to others by us in the world, whether it's the workplace or family, especially raising children, and also in a marriage. It's just a critical factor.
Oh, that reminds me, before you jump into your favorite, the other favorite one you want to talk about today, would you give an example? Because you've worked with so many individuals and couples. Give an example of the change that happened in a relationship when one of the spouses started really acknowledging and expressing appreciation of that other person.
In my coaching, I really spend the first couple sessions really listening to the person talk about their relationship and how they perceive it. And then we really start moving into interventions in each secret. And of course, the first secret is the first secret. And it is the one that we really like people to practice immediately, because it's so powerful. And also because often their spouse has not read the book. They've decided to coach. They themselves recognize that they need to change their behavior. And so they want to coach. One of my clients, an example is that she was always the person who took the kids to the dentist appointments and took them to, Christmas shop, or took them to do all these different things. And she had just had a horrendous week at work where her boss was just really loading on the pressure, and it was Christmas time, and, everybody was overwhelmed. And she came home on Friday night, and she burst into tears in the kitchen. And her husband said, "You know what? I'm going to order takeout for you that'll get delivered. And I'm going to take the kids Christmas shopping." And he went out the door with 3, not 1, but 3 kids of all different ages. And he not only took them out for hours, he took them out for dinner. He got them ice cream. They shopped. They had a marvelous time. And they all stayed up past their bedtime. And then when they came home, he took them upstairs and he wrapped everything and labeled it. So then the kids came bouncing down the stairs with these presents that mommy didn't know about. And so she caught him, in a moment where they were alone. And she said, "I just need you to understand that not only did you rescue me tonight, but when I watch you with our children, I feel so blessed that you're their father. But when I watch and listen to you interact with them, and I watch the way they respond to you, I feel like they're going to turn into the most powerful people in the world, because you're so encouraging and you're so good with them, and you're just always really equal in your attention with all 3 of them, and you're just always there. You're the most phenomenal father I could have ever picked for my children, and I had no clue when we fell in love that you would be this kind of father. And I just want you to know, it just hits me right in the heart every time I watch you. And I love that you're such an incredible father, and I love you so much for it." And she said he welled up with tears and he started to choke. She said he's a guy who's never without words. He's like a very gregarious guy. And she said he choked. And then he sat for a moment and he said, "That means so much to me, because the only thing I really care about is being a good dad to these kids." Now, background, he had an alcoholic father who was very critical and very demanding and very difficult. And so he had irregularities of behavior on top of being criticized continually through his childhood by his only, real desire as a parent. And so it meant everything to him. And she said, after only 2 weeks of practicing the secrets, and she really got good at it, she upped her game and was doing like 4 or 5 a day. She said everything, intimacy in their life, every aspect of their marriage shifted by this one secret. And there's 4 more. And she was just over the moon. He was coming home and, he brought flowers. She said he never remembers to bring flowers. And she said, "I actually don't really care that much about it." So she said, "It's not like I need flowers to feel loved." But she said he brought flowers home a couple days later, and she said he started spontaneously kissing her in the kitchen while the kids were going, ew, and she said it was just incredible how much it shifted them.
Fabulous example. I just love that. Such powerful information you're sharing for my listeners. I hope you all are taking notes and thinking about ways that you can express appreciation to your spouse, other family members, your coworkers. There's just so many opportunities. Beautiful example. Thank you, Anna. Now, let's talk about your favorite secret that you'd like to discuss today.
I love the fifth secret. And in every Go-Giver book, there are 5 either laws or, in this case, secrets. The first 4 are all about giving. The 5th secret is counterintuitive. It's kind of like, you can't pick up an object without an opposing thumb. And it is really powerfully melded to the first 4, because if you don't receive, as the first Go-Giver book, the 5th secret is to receive. If you can't receive, then all you're giving is just, kind of an action, but it doesn't have authenticity underneath it until you really understand that when you give to people, they often want to give back to you. And, so in this case, the 5th secret is about giving to yourself. And the 5th secret is called grow. And growing is a lifelong process from infancy all the way to adulthood. But often what happens when people get into adulthood, or if they've had traumatic experiences, their growing halts. It really stops down. And in some cases, people justify not growing because they feel they need to put their focus on a specific thing. So the example I love to share is, women who stay home for the entire time that their children are growing. Now, don't get me wrong, I stayed home with my children, but there's staying home, and then there's being only other focused and not giving to yourself, to the exclusion of not taking care of yourself. I've known so many mothers that were so harried that they slept in their sweatpants and got back up and ran the next day because they had a baby on the hip. They had, a 4-year-old in preschool, and they had an 8-year-old in elementary school, and life was moving too fast, and, they couldn't keep up with it all. And so they weren't taking care of themselves at all. But what we see a lot when that happens is that the nest empties, and this person does not have a clue who they are, where they are, and they're kind of lost because they haven't invested in themselves. But in a marriage, if you don't keep growing, what happens 20 years later is there's nothing to talk about. It really changes the relationship in ways where, there's nothing new that you're bringing to it. Some couples will share a hobby or an avocation together, like birding, or like, something like, for John and I, long walks in nature. We absolutely love, seeing the wildflowers that bloom and watching nature, seeing owls and birds. And, it's a shared thing, but it keeps you learning and growing. And another example I like to use, Meredith, is taking care of yourself in very basic ways in terms of your health. Are you walking? Are you swimming? Are you doing yoga? Do you have any kind of physical practice that keeps your body moving? Are you eating the right foods? Do you have a green drink in your diet? Or, are you, taking good care to keep your health? Because often in our 20s and 30s, and even into our 40s, people feel invincible. They eat whatever they want. They do whatever they want. They can drink to excess. I mean, alcohol is a whole other topic. Any of these habits can be not only toxic, but they can shut down your health and shut down your growing in specific and powerful ways. So if you don't take care of yourself physically and you arrive at 50 and now you're on 4 medications and you've got serious health problems, that's not just a burden to you. It's a burden to your marriage. It's a burden to your spouse. And if you've done a really bad job of taking care of yourself, then your spouse may end up having to take care of you. So that's just one example, but I like to use the example of avocations and careers as well, because I've never met a stay-at-home mom who doesn't have things that she's really interested in outside of raising children. But the question is, does she get an hour a day or two to spend on that? Is there a priority being given to growing her mind, growing her career, growing the way that, some people write blogs, some people get on a podcast, taking yourself out there in a way that you get to continually be learning. One of the things that we know, I used to be the director for a whole program for Alzheimer's. And one of the things we know about the brain is that if you don't keep learning, your brain doesn't keep engaged and it doesn't keep growing. Mm-hmm. And so growing, the opposite of growing is stagnation. And that's, sort of shutting down all the circuits from your brain to your body to everything else. And it really puts stagnation right smack in the middle of your marriage as well.
If I can add a point there, just going back to the business analogies again too, and leadership is a topic that has engaged me in my whole life. It's, where Anna has focused her career on marriage and relationships. I guess my focus if anything, has been in leadership. And leadership always leads you back to personal development, because that's what leadership really rests upon. Warren Bennis said this wonderful thing about leadership. He said, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that simple. It's also that difficult. And I love that quote from Warren. It kind of reflects, or we reflect that in something we often say about marriage, which is that when you work on a marriage, you don't work on your marriage, you work on yourself. Mm. This is why when Anna works with a couple, she doesn't work with a couple. She works with an individual, one at a time. She's coaching with just you, or coaching with just your partner, but not with the tennis match that is the couple in the room displaying their dysfunction for all to see. And so this is the essence of grow. What you do is the way that you feed your marriage, there's plenty of ways that you feed your partner, that you give to your partner. The first 4 secrets are all about being generous to your partner, but they don't work without the 5th. As Anna said, your 4 fingers don't work without the thumb. It's really hard to pick up a paintbrush with only 4 fingers. Mm-hmm. And so you can be generous till you're blue in the face with your partner, but if you want to really nourish your marriage, you have to grow yourself. You have to build yourself. And a big part of that, Anna's talked about things like avocation and career and hobbies and interests and taking care of your health. Another big part of it is exploring your internal landscape. There's a line in the book that says every person is an unexplored continent.
I love that. And I had written a note to ask you about that. So talk away about that.
Well,
that's
right. What that line was inspired by is that, I've known Anna we've been together for 25 years, and I know so much about her, and there's so much to know. She's done, her curriculum vitae just is like a tip of an iceberg. She's done so many fascinating things in her life, but I've also come to realize how much more there is that I don't know yet. And I realize that there'll never be an end, because a continent is a big place. There are mountains and valleys and rivers and plains and forests and sandy beaches and rocky beaches. And it's like, oh my God, it's a continent. And every person is that way. Every person. There is no such thing as a boring person. There's only a person who presents as boring because you're not really investigating them. So part of the thing in the being generous with your spouse is learning about them, learning what they love, learning what they appreciate, learning where they hurt, learning where they were wounded, learning their past, learning their aspirations for the future. There's so much to learn about them, but there's also a lot to learn about yourself. And I think that one of the ways that we stagnate, as Anna said, the opposite of growth is stagnation. One of the ways that so many people stagnate is that they bring these patterns of dysfunction from their childhood into their adult life.
Yes.
They find a way to cope with them as best they can, and they never take the opportunity to dig below the surface and really investigate. Now, where have I been? What has happened to me up until now? Where do I want to go? And what's really going on inside? I learned more about myself in my first 10 years with Anna than I'd learned in the 50 years up to that point, or 40 years up to that point. Because we have these conversations that really are exploratory. They're so wonderful. So I guess the summary of that for me is that we see marriage as an opportunity to grow yourself in a way that you would never have done on your own, to find dimensions of yourself and aspects of yourself and layers to yourself that you never would have found if you were just, sitting doing life on your own.
That's so true. And I was just thinking for those that choose to become parents, that's another whole area as well.
Yeah.
These 5 secrets applied there in addition to the marriage, obviously in a different context, but each kind of relationship that we embark on has an opportunity for us to be able to grow. And I think an underlying thing, as I'm listening to you use the word grow, I just thought of personal responsibility. It's up to me to make that choice about my own behavior, about what I'm going to notice, be aware of, comment on, not wait for the other person. And I think that that's such a beautiful thread that goes through the book, is the things that I need to do myself, not looking to my spouse, expecting them to do the thing, but I need to do that first. And I know that there's so much more about the book that we could proceed with, but in the sake of time, I want to just say thank you. This has been an incredible conversation. I'm enriched by it because of what you've shared today, and I know my listeners will be too. Please share how they can learn more about each of you and get a copy of this book, this wonderful book, The Go-Giver Marriage.
So, our website is simply gogivermarriage.com. And you can read about the book there. You can read some lovely things that some lovely people have said about the book. You can also order the book through. We give all kinds of buy links from all your favorite vendors. You can buy a signed copy, and we have a signed copies link. But also in the other pages of the site, you'll find description of our programs. We're doing a live 2.5-hour workshop every month. It's live on Zoom that we do with people anywhere in the world. And that's called Living the 5 Secrets to Lasting Love. And we go into the 5 secrets and the 5 toxic behaviors in depth. And also, you mentioned at the start, Anna's coaching program, training and certifying go-giver coaches, people who want to learn how to bring a coaching practice into their own profession, their own career. We'll be starting that program in the fall. And also Anna's individual coaching with people. That service is also right there on the site. So it's one-stop shopping for everything we're doing.
Excellent. Great. Anything you want to add, Anna, as we wrap up?
Well, I loved what you just said, Meredith, because it's really about leadership in a relationship. Is that when you recognize your personal responsibility to not only grow and stay aware of what is needed and to initiate rather than be passive. I think that is leadership in a relationship. And as a parent, having that grow awareness also informs you about your parenting style, because we all had these roadmaps to being parents by our parents. But the question you have to ask yourself is, were they functional parents? So, and again, that's leadership. When you really take responsibility for breaking a cycle that might have been put on you when you were a child and not replicating it with your child or repeating it. That's a powerful moment of awareness and of growing. And so I love that you said that piece about personal responsibility. It's so important.
Well, I'll just say real quick, I am so fortunate. We have a fabulous daughter who married a man similar to the fellow you were just describing. They have 2 children, and to watch him with these kids, knowing the background he had, is just so inspiring to see how much he adores them. I mean, they're 5 and 7 as of today, and he still looks at them with that adoring look that you have when they're first born. It's just so wonderful to watch. Both of them are amazing that way, but just watching him as the father and what he's instilling in them is very encouraging, and
Mhm.
as a grandparent, just so exciting. So thank you. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to both of you for who you are as human beings, who you show up as, the important information that you are putting out in the world through this book. I just can't recommend it too strongly. I really believe every married couple should read this, or people considering getting married, because there's so much in there that will help you go into the relationship in such a healthy way to really build a strong partnership for, your lifetime together. It's just beautiful. So thank you both for who you are and what you contributed.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Meredith.
much. Yeah, thank you so, so much.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.